Well, ladies and gentlemen, hello everybody tuning in. Welcome to our webinar. This webinar, Start Early, Grow Steadily, Investing 101 for the Young Adult. I have a very distinguished panel joining me here today. Now, this seminar is brought to all of you jointly by CPF and MoneySense. Now, before we officially get started, I want to share a bit more about housekeeping announcements for all of you as well. All right, so we do have a slide that we're going to bring up here for all of you. So the chat function will be used to broadcast messages. You can also submit any questions that you have for any of our panelists through the Q&A tab. Now, please do not share your personal details. And if any of you are facing issues with video or audio, please leave and rejoin this session. Now, so ladies and gentlemen, let's get started. We're going to break it down for all of you what we're going to be talking about today. So a lot of you just started work, a lot of you are young. So we're going to answer three major questions for all of you. The first is getting started. Why should you get started? How can you get started? Now, after you've identified that you should get started, we're going to be talking a bit more about risk profile. What is risk profile? Are you a low risk taker? Are you a high risk taker? And how does it affect you in your investment journey? And lastly, once you have identified your own risk profile, we're going to be talking about diversification. Is it important? Should you practice diversification? So we hope to answer those three questions for all our young adults out here. So I would like to introduce our very distinguished panel joining me here. Firstly, we have Dorcas Loh. So Dorcas is the Deputy Investment Director at the CPF Board. Dorcas has more than 10 years handling the CPF investment scheme, and she's passionate about promoting financial literacy. Welcome, Dorcas.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Next, we have Sean Lee. Sean is the Certified Financial Planner, Vice President for Financial Planning Literacy at DBS Bank. He's a regular speaker on personal finance topics and frequently featured in the media. In 2023, he was appointed to the MAS Joint Committee that produced the Basic Financial Planning Guide. Welcome,
Good evening, everyone.
And lastly, we do have Thomas. Thomas Chua is the founder of Steady Compounding. His newsletter has more than 12,000 subscribers, and his following on X is 83,000. Now, he writes about how everyday investors can build long-term wealth in the stock market through patience and sound principles. So welcome, Thomas.
Hey, hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Great. So I want to start this panel with a question for our three panelists, right? So looking back at your investment journey, I'd like you to tell our audience tuning in today, first question would be, what age do you get started? And second is, looking back, what is one thing that you would do differently? Maybe we start with Dorcas first.
Okay, wow, that's probably like quite some time back. I think I get started my investing in the late 20s, maybe about 29. Yeah, but now thinking back, I felt that I could have started much earlier, maybe 1 or 2 years after I started working, because I had this thinking that I need to have a huge sum of money before I can start investing. Yeah, but eventually I find that actually you can do so bits by bits every month. Yeah, so that will help to build out, like, through the power of compounding.
That's a great point, right? So, whether you must invest a large sum or whether you can start small, right? So we're going to cover that a bit later on as well. So Sean, what's your take on this?
I started investing when I was 28 years old, and at the time, I invested in a stock, not fully knowing what I was investing into, and I kind of lost 20% of its value just 2 weeks later, and I sold it at a loss. Looking back, I wish I had done a lot more research and done my homework before investing in it.
So doing due diligence is something important as well that all young investors should consider also. Thomas?
Yeah, so I first learned about compounding and the benefits of compounding when I was 15. So that was when I wanted to start. What I did back then was I went door to door to knock at different brokerage houses to try and open an account. But every one of them said, no, you can't, right, until you're 18. So I've officially started investing at 18 years old. The moment I turned 18, I went to open a brokerage account. And I remember the moment I opened my brokerage account and put money in, I remember it was $2,500. One of the biggest mistakes when I think back and reflecting, and I think many of the readers or viewers can relate to today is, I was checking the stock price every 15 to 20 minutes. And this was during the time whereby, I don't have a brokerage app. It wasn't on the phone. So I have to open up my laptop, log in, and then take a look at the stock price. But the problem with that is that whenever I'm looking at all these flashing prices, there's usually a call to action, which is not very healthy when it comes to compounding, because I would have itchy fingers and want to do something about it. And when it comes to growing wealth, it is a lot like, the saying, they say investing is like a bar of soap. The more you touch it, the smaller it becomes. So, one of the things I would do if I were to go back and start again, is avoid looking at the stock prices so much, right? Once you invest, you want to leave it for the long run.
So this is a lesson on compounding, right? So Albert Einstein was the one who said that compounding is actually the eighth wonder of the world. And we hope to break it down for all of you a bit later on as well, why compounding is important. And very diverse experiences from our panel. We got somebody who started 29, 28, and also at 18 years old. Does it make a difference? We're going to get to that in a bit as well. So let's get started now. So the first topic I shared earlier on that we're going to get started with would be why should you get started and how should you get started, right? So I'd like to throw the first question over to Sean, right? So for our friends who just started working, they just got their first adult money, right? What are some considerations that they must have in order to start investing?
So congratulations to our viewers at home if you have just graduated and started on your first job and receiving your first paycheck. I remember when I received my first paycheck, I was really excited. I've not seen my bank account figures jump that much before. I took my first paycheck, I treated my family to sushi day, I remember, and then I finally gave my parents an allowance. I was really happy to do that because they've all along gave me an allowance, and finally I could give them a significant allowance, and then I've parked the rest of the money aside. Now, for young adults, if you're thinking about what to do with the sum of money that you have, and you're thinking about investing with them, it's important to build the foundations of your financial plan first. So just like building a house, you would have to set up the foundations of your house first before building the walls and the pillars. If not, the house would come down crumbling quite easily. It's important to build the foundations of your financial plan first. So how do you go about building these foundations? There are three main components. First, you want to build up a pot of emergency funds. And this emergency funds is important for you such that in the event of an emergency, for example, a retrenchment, or you just feel like having a switch of jobs, or if there's a medical emergency, there's a pot of money that's liquid for you to access to fund these emergencies. How much should you save for your emergency funds? At least 3 to 6 months of your monthly expenses. But if you're a gig worker and your job is not so stable, you may want to set aside at least 12 months of your monthly expenses for emergency funds. Now, the second area that young adults should look at is the area of insurance. Now, when it comes to insurance, it really helps to provide for medical emergencies. So, for example, in the event of hospitalization, having a suitable medical plan and something that can fit within your budget can help to pay for any unexpected hospitalization bills or surgery that comes along. Another area is critical illness. And for critical illness, it covers things like cancer, heart attack, or stroke. And those things do not just affect the elderly. It can happen, unfortunately, to anyone. Providing for the area of hospitalization needs and having critical illness covered would set you up with the second pillar, a second area of building a strong financial foundation. Now the third area that you want to look at is to stop leakages from coming out from your plan. So if you have viewers at home, if you have any personal loans or credit card or high pay interest loans, you really want to pay that off first because those the interest rates that are being charged on them are really high. And if you were to start investing in with funds that you could pay them off, your investments may not generate a high enough return to pay off those interests. So having those areas put in place before you start investing will put you in a much better state when you start investing and provide you with a much positive investment experience.
Great insights, right? So firstly, of course, you must have emergency savings, 3 to 6 months, gig workers about 12 months. You must have insurance coverage as well, just to get things going. For our young friends who just started working, right? So follow-up question for Sean, right? So, I've added up money for the first time, right? I just want to go travel. I want to, YOLO. Why is it important for us to think about insurance and emergency savings first before starting investing?
Yeah, so perfectly fine. I mean, youth is one of the best times. You have the energy, you have the strength to go and do the things you want. It's not that you have to put them aside and not do them, but strike a balance between your goals, things that you want to do, as well as your insurance and building emergency funds. I think you could strike a balance between spending a large sum, spending all that you have on that particular trip that you want, or perhaps looking at scaling them back a little, yet providing some buffer to build up emergency funds as well as getting adequate insurance.
Great. So this is very important for our friends tuning in as well. Now I want to shift the conversation now to Thomas, right? So Thomas, you mentioned you started at 18 as compared to the other panelists starting at 28. So why is starting early such a huge advantage?
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with what Sean said, because when it comes to investing, right, the number one rule is we want to take care of the downside first, so that the upside can take care of itself. And whatever Sean just said, right, you know, the emergency fund, insurance and all that, is the number one thing anybody should take care of first, even before we start investing. And I thought it's also very smart that, you know, we always want to tackle the lowest hanging fruit first. And so if we have any credit card debt, those run up to 20%. It's very, very difficult for any investments out there to beat these costs, right? So if we have that, we want to make sure we bring it down. Now, then this brings me to the, you know, the other topic, whereby why is it so important to start early? Why is it so important to start as soon as we can? And that is because when it comes to growing wealth, when it comes to compounding, it's always a function of two variables. One is your rate of return, and the other one is the amount of time you give it for the investment to actually grow. And consider this example, right? Two friends, both of them put $500 over 30 years. Both of them earn 8% returns every single year, right? Not a single one of them put a cent more after that 30 years. Just one difference. One of them started at 25, and another one started 10 years later at 35, right? Both of them put for 30 years. And what's going to happen when they are both at 65 years old is that the person who started at 25 is going to have more than 2 times the amount of wealth than the person who started a little bit later, right? Because when you put your money to work way, way earlier, the money, you know, starts to go to work and it grows itself, right? It's going to start to compound. And when we are able to do that, it's going to do a lot of the heavy lifting later on in life, right? And I always like to give this example. We look at Warren Buffett, one of the best investors today in the world, one of the richest as well. But if you were to look at the amount of wealth that he has, over 99% comes after 65 years old, right? So investment is going to be very, very heavy backhanded. But what's most important is that when we start early, it's like rolling a snowball down a very, very steep hill, right? The steeper the hill, the bigger it is going to get, right? And you know, the earlier we are able to let it do the heavy lifting rather than us having to put in so much.
You know, compounding is really such an important thing, right? So you started at 18, they started at 29, so that means you're going to have twice their money at 65, so congrats. Now, but for our friends who just started working, right, they might not have much disposable savings left. How much is too little to get started?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question because, you know, when I first started, the reason why, you know, I only had 2,500 when I first started, and most of it is put into just one asset. And the reason is because back in those days, right, the brokerage fees is very, very expensive. There's a fixed variable, usually around $50, and a variable component, which is quite high percentage. But nowadays, because of, you know, the amount of assets that's out there has been a lot more advanced. There's a lot more improvement to this area. You can start for as low as $50, right? And you're able to invest, you know, monthly, so on and so forth. And to be honest, I think it's even better if we start with smaller amount, because one thing that cannot be taught, right? You cannot read this, you cannot learn this from talks or anything, because it's the one thing that we must experience for ourselves is volatility, right? And we want to learn how we behave after we invest in any asset. If the stock price draw down, how do I behave? Do I start running for the exit, right? And that is one of the most important, because if we don't know ourselves, then the market is a very expensive place to find out. So what we want to do is we start very, very small. We learn how we behave, and then from then on, you know, then we determine what kind of asset class we want to go for.
That's a great point as well, right? It all boils down to risk profile, which we'll cover very shortly as well. But I want to move to Dorcas now, right? So Dorcas, CPF, a lot of people say, yeah, it's for the old people. I'm so young, why should I be concerned about CPF, right? What's your take on that?
Okay, yeah, so I think that's a very good question. So CPF members, I mean, including our young adults, you can see CPF like as your life partner who journey with you through like the different key stages in life. Yeah, so in fact, you know, upon even when the children nowadays, they already have their CPF accounts, you know, yeah, like their MediSave account, and then Sean mentioned about building a foundation, right? So you can view CPF as the foundation for you to pursue your financial goals. Yep. So in the past 1 year, CPF Board launched the Plan with CPF, and it stands for Plan Life Ahead Now. Yeah. So it actually covers like different important areas such as like housing, healthcare insurance, as well as retirement. Yeah, so these are some planners that we have on our website, and I guess they are actually pretty useful too for the young adults to actually start to exploring on it. Yeah, so I actually encourage our young adults to go on the website, and start using these tools to plan out these important areas.
And these tools are free.
Yes, these tools are free. Yeah.
Great. So something to consider about, right? These tools that Dorcas just mentioned. Something to, as I can summarize what our speakers spoke about for the first topic, right? Which is really to have different baskets for different things, right? Have protection, have coverage, have emergency savings before you start investing, and no sum is too small, right? $50. You can start at $50 every single month. And also Dorcas also shared on CPF journeying with you as well, right? So for our friends working in a full-time job, you will contribute to CPF. You have employer's contribution as well. So CPF is there to help with your journey, with your investing journey as well.
Yes, through all the key milestones in your
Of course,
life.
yeah.
Yeah, and I fully agree with Dorcas on the importance of CPF. For many young adults, as they purchase their first home, they may take up the biggest loan that they could be afforded, or they could spend all of their ordinary account contributions on their monthly mortgage, not knowing that this CPF OA is really their money, and this would be an important pot of gold, the CPF, that would be really crucial for their retirement as it streams out a lifelong income.
Yeah, and it's compounding as well, isn't it?
Yes,
CPF,
yeah.
OA, and SA. I want to move the conversation now to our second topic, right? Hopefully we've convinced all of you why you should get started. If you are just got started working, no sum is too small, right? So Thomas earlier on gave the example of somebody who started at in let's say 18 versus 28 years old. At 65, one of them will have doubled. The person who started at 18 will have double the person who started at 28, right? So it is important to get started early. Now, so from there, once you're convinced that you should get started, then we should be talking about risk profile now, right? So Sean, if you can break it down for us, what exactly is risk profile and how does it affect us in our investing journey?
Right, so really risk, I feel, it's about the amount of losses you can take in your portfolio or in your investment value before you feel uneasy about that loss, before you decide to sell some, or if not, you sell all. So it's if you're thinking about having an appetite, right? It's the amount of food you think you can eat before you kind of like throw up. So let me just take for example. So if you're a conservative investor and you take on an investment instrument that's too risky for you, what happens is that when that investment instrument pulls down in value, the conservative investor would panic. You end up selling your particular investment instrument you are invested in, rather than staying with the investment instrument through your intended time horizon that you wanted to stay invested for. Hence, you realize the loss. On the other flip side, if you're able to take more risks and you are able to take more risks with your investments, and then you invest with something too conservative, then you may not realize actually more returns that you can take. When you invest in something more risky, that will provide you with higher expected returns. Now, when you look at risk, I find there are three components which we can frame risk. First is your need to take risk, right? So if for most young adults, I would think that your need to take risk is high because you have not saved up a lot for your retirement nest egg. You need to take more risk in order to achieve your goals. Yeah. The next part is on your ability to take risks. And in terms of ability to take risks, there are a few components. One is the time horizon that you have. And we've spoken at length about young adults having a long time horizon. That actually increases your ability to take risks. Another component is having sufficient insurance coverage. And like I've shared earlier, if you have enough sufficient coverage, in times when there is a medical emergency, then those insurance plans and coverage that you have can actually provide that payout. It doesn't force you to having to sell your investments at a bad time when you are realized at a loss. Another component of providing you an ability to take risks is also having a financial buffer, and that's where the emergency funds come in. Another important part to look at is also the stability of income for a young adult when it comes to investing. So if you have a very stable employment, you have you can expect a regular source of income coming in. That increases your ability to invest. But however, if your income is unstable and if you're in a gig industry, unfortunately your ability to take risks is a little bit lesser. So you've covered need to take risks, the ability to take risks, and then the final component is really your willingness to take risks. And that's the emotional part. How much do you feel like you want to take risks? So, many of this risk profiling questionnaires do cover all of these three. But if you are able to have an understanding of the amount of risk you can take, matched to the appropriate investment instrument, that will allow you to have a more successful investment experience, realize the returns of the investment instrument they're supposed to give you.
Great, thanks. That's a great breakdown on risk, right? So a lot to consider. This webinar is on investing, but I just want to share, because we've been talking about insurance as well. So for our young friends, the best time really to buy insurance is when you're young and healthy, right? Take it from me, right? So if you have a medical condition, then your insurance becomes a lot more expensive, and that will help lessen the money that you have towards investing, right? So important to buy insurance, have the basic coverage as we talked about. But of course, we're not going to touch so much on insurance because we're going to be talking about a bit more about investing. This is a 101 for investing, right? So I'd like to move on to Dorcas now. So CPF is risk-free, backed by the Singapore government, right? So in that case, if I have a high risk tolerance, based on what Sean shared earlier, what can I do?
Okay, all right, so let's say if our CPF members are willing to take some form of risk, so we have the CPF investment scheme, which is the portfolio I'm working on, and we have various products under the CPF investment schemes, and I would say that they are pretty diversified because there's also we have the unit trust, we have shares as well as we have fixed income instruments. Yeah, but of course, at the end of the day, we also hope to caution, that as with all investment, it comes with risk. So, so members out there who are listening, we actually need to do some homework, find out more about the product, before going into investment. Yeah, but of course, for members who really do not want to take risks or they are not very comfortable in taking risks, it will be good to actually leave the monies in our CPF system. As you mentioned, right, we have a risk-free interest rates. Your ordinary account earns you 2.5% per annum, and your other CPF accounts earns you 4%. Yeah, and in fact, even for the government is also trying to help people to save more, and the government is also giving additional 1% for the first 60K inside the CPF accounts. Yeah, so I guess if you have a 3.5% and a 5% per annum, it's probably pretty decent by not doing anything. If let's say you are considered a risk-averse investors. Yeah, but of course, if you are risk-taking, feel free, you can do your homework, do your research, and you can take on the CPF investment scheme.
So in terms of CPF investment scheme, right, some of our friends tuning in are hearing it for the first time. They just started working and then they are exposed to the CPF system. So for CPF IS or CPF investment scheme, what is the threshold for them before they can start investing the money?
Okay. Yep. So in order to invest under the CPF investment scheme, you need to have at least 20,000 in your ordinary account, and beyond which you can invest using your ordinary account savings. And if you wish to invest using a special account, and then you need to have at least 40,000 inside your special account.
So beyond the threshold, right, can we do a lump sum investment, or can we do like monthly investment, like dollar cost averaging type of investment?
Oh, okay. So actually, there is actually no restriction on whether should it be a lump sum investing or whether should be a regular kind of investing. It's really up to individual on like how much money do they have at that point in time and how comfortable they are doing it. Yeah, of course, if you do it as a regular investing, it does build some form of discipline. Yeah, and then you can not think too much about it. And of course, if you do a lump sum investing, there are different views. You got to see like the timing of the market and so on. Yeah, so it really depends on which investment views do you subscribe to. Yeah, so the short answer is we do not prescribe it.
So for all our friends out there, if you're getting CPF for the first time, this is something that you can consider once you have enough CPF savings, as you heard from Dorcas, 20,000 in your OA, 40,000 in your SA. Beyond that amount, you can use it to do investments, right? So it's up to you to do a bit of research, do a bit of homework as well. Remember, due diligence is very important as well, as you heard from our speakers earlier on as well.
But I also just want to add on a caution is that provided they feel like they are confident of beating the risk-free rates.
Yes, of course. And the risk-free rate in SA is quite hard to beat, if you ask me. It's a pretty good interest rate, risk-free from the Singapore government, right? An extra 1%, as you mentioned, at $60,000. So, I want to move the conversation now to different life stages, right? A lot of our friends here just started working. Maybe perhaps their future plans would be having children, buying a home. Does our risk profile change, Thomas?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So when it comes to growing wealth, right, we often think about risk in terms of mistakes of commission. That means mistakes we actually make. Maybe we lose money in a certain type of investment, so on and so forth. But I think there's another aspect to it, which is mistake of omission. That means things that we did not do. So I think, what Dorcas and what Sean today, they touched on, a great variety, including the CPF instrument, which is essentially risk-free, but giving you 4 to 5% in terms of interest. So when it comes to, managing investments like this, if your risk appetite is very, very low, then we go for safer instrument. But, what's most important is that we actually take some form of action, because if we were to just leave our money in the bank, it is just 0.5%. As we've seen in recent years, inflation is rearing its ugly head, right? So if I were to look at, Kaya Toast set, pre-COVID, it was like maybe $4. Now it's around $6.50. Right, so inevitably, whether we take action or not, things are going to happen, right? So that's when we want to decide, what's the appropriate amount of risk for us to take. Then, of course, it comes to if I'm younger, right? I just started work in my 20s today, then I would definitely put a little bit more money towards the equity side, right? Because the longer my time horizon, the longer I can stay in the market, right? But again, if I'm risk averse, if I cannot tolerate any form of volatility, then I have to be honest with myself and put it towards the more safer side, be it CPF, be it SSB, or be it T-bills. Especially if you have a big wedding coming up you're saving for, or you have a trip you want to go, or renovation, down payment, right? Then you want to set aside this money in very, very liquid assets, right? So for me personally, if I want to save for very, very big expense, right, I usually put them in just SSB, right? So that I don't invest money I would need in the next 3 to 5 years.
So, this is an investing 101, right? So I want to break it down for our friends tuning in. You mentioned SSB, you mentioned T-bills. Can you explain what those are?
Yeah, so that's a great question. When it comes to SSB, I really like that instrument. One thing is because it's AAA.
SSB, firstly, Singapore Savings Bond.
Singapore Savings Bond, backed by the Singapore government. And the best thing about it is that it gives you the flexibility of taking out the money with 1 month notice and $2, right? So back when the interest rate was slightly higher, so there was a period of time in Singapore whereby, not just Singapore, the entire world, we were having high inflation, so interest rates started to rise, right? So, I felt back then it was a good time for me to put down some money to make sure I don't invest this money I need over the next 5 years in the stock market. So I park it in the SSB and lock in the interest rate at higher rates, right? And this is fantastic because I get to lock it in for the next 10 years. But if I were to need the money for whatever reason, maybe it's a down payment, maybe it's an overseas trip, I can just liquidate it and take it out. So this is the flexibility of SSB. Of course, interest rates have come down a little bit, globally. Then when it comes to T-bill, they comes in both 6 months and 1 year.
Treasury bills.
Treasury bills, right? So it's very, very short term. You put in, then after that, when it expires, you get your money out again, right? Yeah. So these are the difference between SSB and T-bills.
Yeah. So basically, plan for your major life milestones. If you are saving for a home, perhaps do it in something safer. As Thomas mentioned, if you are saving towards your wedding as well, can put it in something safer as well. So in that regard, should a young investor think about different buckets then, right? One bucket for safer instruments, perhaps maybe like I'm going to get married, so this needs to be a bit safer, and then maybe another bucket, a bit more risk, equities, long term. Should they be thinking about something like this?
Yeah. This is a very important consideration to have. So I would always recommend people to sit down and really try and look, at least 3 to 5 years ahead. What are the major life events you have? And this is, of course, after we have taken care of whatever Sean mentioned earlier, all your emergency fund, all these are settled. Then we want to look at the next 3 to 5 years. If we have big expenses, then we want to make sure we set aside this cash in very, very liquid, very, very safe instruments so that we make sure we only invest money that we don't need over the next 5 years minimum, right? Because when it comes to the market, especially, we do not know over the next 3 months, 6 months, 1, 2 years, what will happen, right? It may decline, it may go up, we do not know. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to cash out at in opportunistic moments, right? We want to make sure we are able to put our money in and compound, right? So it's important to segregate your money accordingly based on your life stage.
Great. So I want to bring the conversation back to Sean now, right? So I want to ask you to really define risk for all of us. What are some mistakes that our young investors shouldn't make in that case when defining their own risk profile?
I think when
You know, so maybe I just substantiate a bit more, right? I might be saying like, I can take risks, right? But when I see my portfolio going down 20%, you know, that's when I feel nervous and then I want to sell, right? I may say I'm a risk taker, but when I see red for the first time, then you know, a problem comes in, right? So what are some common mistakes that we should be looking out for our young investors?
Sure, I think for young investors setting out, and as what Thomas shared, it's very important to list out the life goals and major milestones that you have. And for a young adult, yeah, some of the biggest financial decisions that you have to make are coming up in the next few years of your life. You could get married, you could purchase a first home, whether you are intending to settle down with a partner or not. Most people want to have their first home, and that comes with a down payment, that comes with a renovation cost, and these days renovation costs are not as affordable as before, $30,000, $50,000, even $100,000. That's a significant sum of money to set aside. For many people, like even for myself, within 7 years of getting my first paycheck, I got married, I got my first child, I had my second child. So those are additional expenses that even though you have just graduated and just receiving your first paycheck, you may not expect these expenses to come up along the way. So try to plan as much as you can, save, align, like what Thomas shared, align your goals to the amount of risk that you can take. If there's anything of this goes coming out within 3 to 5 years, the recommendation would be invest something, really safe, like the Singapore savings bonds, gives you a guaranteed rate of return, and as well as gives you the flexibility to withdraw as and when you wish. So that will help you to manage risk in an appropriate manner in the first few years. And then for amounts of money that you feel like taking on more risk and investing, then you can take a bit more risk from there. Yeah, but doing so will allow you to calibrate the risk accordingly.
Yeah, so different pots for different life goals as well, something important, right? So Dorcas, in this case, how should we be considering CPF within our risk profile as well? Because CPF is guaranteed in this case, right? What's your take on this?
Okay, so maybe in this part we'll talk about the diversification. So from a member's point of view, sometimes they will see the CPF monies as part of like the safer portfolio, right? Because it earns the risk-free interest rates. Yeah, so they don't really take risk with the CPF monies. Yeah, but instead, they will take risk with their own cash. Yeah, because the opportunity cost of investing using cash is actually lower. Yeah, so if you put both the CPF investments as well as the non-CPF investment together. So this is where there is diversification, and in a way this also helps to spread out your investment risk being taken.
So it's great that Dorcas touched on diversification, right? Because that's actually our third topic that we're going to be covering today. So we covered why you should get started. We've covered a bit on risk profile as well. So you've got to identify yourself. Of course, CPF website, we do have some questionnaires for you to really identify your own risk profile as well. And then now diversification, right? So we're going to cover, Dorcas touched a little bit on that, why diversification is actually very important, right? So I want to ask this question now to either Sean or Thomas, maybe Thomas this time, right? Now, so what are some simple ways for young adults to diversify when starting out?
Yeah, so maybe I just share what diversification is. So basically what we don't want to do is we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket, right? Because if something goes wrong, then you're just going to lose most of your capital. So I mean, I've seen a lot of young investors, they are usually very, very aggressive when it comes to investing, like all in on one particular stock, for example. This is a big no-no, right? We don't want to do that. Because, if we were to lose, 10% of our capital, we need 20% returns in order to recover. And when you put so much in one, right, there's a lot of risks that may come along with it, because ultimately, it is going to be uncertain, right? Nothing is certain when it comes to investing. And the biggest kind of risk is, things that we don't see it coming, right? A lot of times, like whether it's the pandemic or whether it's the global financial crisis, a lot of times we don't see this risk coming. And so when it comes to diversification, right, we don't want to just diversify across one asset class, right? Okay, so like if I were to just look at the stock market itself, I definitely do not want to put everything in a handful of stocks, right? I would want to own, a diversified index, for example, especially for someone who don't have the time to look at individual stocks, or don't have the energy, or don't have the training to look at financial statements. Then we want to look at diversification from an index point of view. Then beyond equities, there is also, the more stable component. That's where your CPF comes in. That's where your SSB comes in, right? That's where the other asset classes come in. So that is how I approach diversification.
So in this case, would you recommend a dollar cost averaging strategy, or like I have a bonus, right?
Yeah.
My bonus is 3 months. I dump it all at one go.
Yeah, so I mean that is a wonderful question, because a lot of times I hear from my friends, they always ask me, hey, why don't I wait until the market draw down, then I start investing, right? Then I buy it this way. And there was this, there was this back test study. There was this guy, finance guy, who did a back test, and this he published an article called "Even God Can't Beat DCA," right? Dollar cost averaging, meaning I set a particular, month. Every single month, I just buy into the or invest routinely every single month, automate it. Right, and the truth is, if we only buy and buy in lump sum during this so-called opportunistic time, 70% of the time you cannot beat DCA, right? You cannot beat DCA, and a lot of times it's because between a market low and the next market low that potentially come, the next low could be a lot higher than the previous low, right? Because the market could have moved on already, right? So what we don't want to do is we don't want to time the market that much, right? We want to do DCA. The best is if we automate it and we don't even see it, right? Because if it requires energy, most of the times we will procrastinate, we will not get it done. Or another reason why DCA is important is because it helps us manage our emotions, right? It helps us manage. If I were to put in one entire lump sum today and the stock market tomorrow's drop 20-30%, right? I would be unnerved, especially as a new investor, right? So DCA helped me smooth out that emotional aspect, which is equally important when it comes to investing, right? Because it's a lot about emotional control.
And you also mentioned, right, earlier on, $50. Is that a too small sum for DCA every month? Like automate $50 every month that goes into an investment. Is that too little?
No, in fact, I would say like, starting small and, wetting your feet first is the most ideal thing, because we want to learn how we react when it comes to investing. And a good rule of thumb, I often tell other new investors is that if it takes you, say, 2 years to save this amount of money, use at least minimum 1 year to slowly deploy it, because first you want to learn about how you react when the stock market starts to gyrate. And a lot of times our emotional reaction is tied to our net worth and our earnings power, right? Which is why if you take a certain amount of time, use at least half the time you took to save to slowly deploy. And not just understand yourself, but also when you are a new investor, you start investing and you become more serious about it, you would slowly grow your skills along that way. And we don't want the tuition fees, right? Especially if we are new, and we don't want it to be too expensive.
So Sean, convince us, why is diversification important?
Yes, I think what diversification does, and just to add on what Thomas has shared, who has given a very comprehensive introduction to that, I think what it really does is to provide more stability to your investment portfolio while giving you sufficient returns. And there are two ways, I think, typically one should diversify. One, they could diversify across sectors, which means not just looking at technology sector, not just looking at financial sectors, not just looking at commercial goods, but you want to diversify across the different sectors for your core part of your portfolio. The second part, which you can diversify, is really diversify across geographies, across different indexes, across different countries. So not just the US stock market per se, not just the Singapore Straits Times Index, but preferably you want to spread your eggs across many baskets around the world. And just to provide an example, while the US stock market, the S&P 500 has done really well over the last decade or so. Maybe we've forgotten that just back in 2000 to 2009, there was a lost decade where the S&P 500 actually returned a negative 0.95% annualized over those 9 years. And not many people can hold on to their investments and not see their investments grow over 9 years. But in contrast, over the same period, if an investor invested in the emerging markets, and when we refer to emerging markets, it includes like South Korea, like Japan, South Korea, like China, like India, for example, the emerging markets actually return about close to 10% a year for the same period, 2000 to 2009. So having a globally diversified portfolio in developed markets and emerging markets for the core portion of a portfolio will be very useful for a young adult first starting out.
So that's a great case study, right? 2000 and 2009, because today, markets are just booming to all-time high. So this is a great pullback to reality on why diversification is actually important. But I want to ask a follow-up question on this as well. Like today, majority of the index funds are actually based on the US stock market, right? So in this case, would that be too concentrated, even though it's across different sectors within the US markets?
Actually, there are many funds and ETFs as well available that focus on different markets or even globally diversified ones. And I think the naysayers would then say that if you diversify too much, for example, in a globally diversified way, perhaps your returns will come down tremendously. But having studies done and over a globally diversified index, even in a very conservative way, they tend to return about 7% a year historically on average. If you think about 7% a year, and that's the expected returns that you can get for an investor, if they were to invest $2,000 a month and then they get 7% return, you will achieve $1 million in 20 years' time. And it's not pretty good. I mean, not everybody gets to become a millionaire. Yeah, and if you invest in a very globally diversified way and you feel that that can give you a pretty reliable way of getting returns, you know that perhaps in 20 years' time you could achieve $1 million if you faithfully invest $2,000 a month. But even if you don't have $2,000 a month, you set aside about $1,000 a month, then you could get to $1 million about 28 or so years' time. And you can reach that $1 million as well. So it's not all about maximizing returns at the same time for the core portion of one's portfolio, especially for important life goals like retirement. You may want to start with investing in a very globally diversified manner. And it's not to say as well that having particular tactical focus, or if you feel that perhaps now in this age you have a particular view of a certain sector that you want to focus on, you can't express it. But if you have no extra money set aside, if you want to take perhaps 10 or 20% of your portfolio to focus on a particular sector, you can. Yeah, but for core portion of your portfolio, you may want to invest in something that's globally diversified and then get a more reliable rate of return.
And the keyword here is, of course, globally diversified, right, Dorcas?
Oh yes, I think there's a very good discussion on the diversification. So I wanted to add that actually within the CPF investment scheme, we also have a wide variety of products, ranging from like different asset classes, from like equities to fixed income. Yeah, and also like what Sean and Thomas have mentioned is also across like different like globally diversified and also across like different regions. Yeah, so actually even as part of CPF investment scheme, we also encourage our investors to diversify when they are doing their investing. Yeah, so I think just now Thomas also mentioned about there may be this group of investors who feel like they want to take on some risk, but yet they are not very confident to do so. Yeah, so come first half of 2028, the CPF board will be introducing a new investment scheme to actually cater to this group of members who feel like they want to take on some risk, but may not have less financial resources or do not prefer to actively manage their portfolio. Yep. So under this new investment scheme, we have this diversified life cycle investment products. And when the member puts the money within this product, the member do not need to actively manage this product, but there will be a mechanism whereby it will auto allocate the monies from a higher risk asset class, for example, maybe equities, to a lower risk asset class like bonds, as the member grows older. Yeah, so the members can actually look forward to this new investment scheme. It will be of a lower cost and more simplified because members do not need to choose among many other products. And do look out for the details when it's being released subsequently.
So this will be in 2028?
Yes, 2028.
Oh, okay, great. So this meets the middle tier of people, right? May not have enough knowledge about the markets, but yet want higher returns.
Yeah, correct.
So great.
So I just want to share that I'm really excited about this new upcoming scheme.
Yeah, we're
that
excited as
CPF
well.
is launching because what it does is that it calibrates the risk, as an investor is nearing their retirement. Many times, when we speak to people or get advice from us, you provide an advice, but then you can't really stay with the person through their whole investment journey. And what happens if the investor is nearing retirement? Do they hold on to that particular investment, or how do they de-risk it? When do they sell? But with this upcoming new scheme that CPF is launching, this is a set and forget instrument that they can invest. The risk will be calibrated. It will become less risky nearing their retirement age. So it's really easy for somebody to get started on.
And I like it you say set and forget, right? So then it removes all the emotions as what Thomas mentioned earlier on, right? So you don't need to worry about it, you don't need to stress about it if there's a drawdown, if market's crashing, you don't really need to worry about it because ultimately when it comes to CPF money, it's for retirement and you have to look at the long run goal.
Yes, so this product is suitable for those investors who wish to stay invested for the long term. Yeah, need to ride out the market volatility as well.
Yeah, fantastic. So Thomas, I want to come back to you, right? Like, what's stopping somebody from, going all in on a particular very hot sector versus diversification, right? So, they've been hearing tips from gurus and their friends like, oh, this sector is so hot, we have to buy the stocks in it now. Versus diversification, right? What would you say to our attendees tuning in with regard to this?
I do notice that a lot of new investors, or maybe some have been investing for quite some time, they like to get their investment advice from YouTube, so on and so forth. And a lot of times, this advice or tips will touch on a lot of these hot sectors. Maybe now it's AI, so on and so forth. But when it comes to investing, we always want to think about, what is hot at the moment may not necessarily be good for shareholders. And what do I mean by that? When I look at the automobile industry or when I look at the airline industry, right, these two industries has provided a lot of value for, humankind, whether it's through transportation, productivity, so on and so forth. But the thing is, if I were to look at just these two particular sectors, they don't generate very, very good returns for shareholders. A lot of the benefit is accruing to consumers and society at large, right? And so when it comes to, a lot of these hot sectors, for example, generally it is extremely competitive because there's a lot of capital chasing after this asset class, right? And so when there's so much competition out there, it's not as great for shareholders. So what we want to do is always, we cannot just look at one particular sector, right? We must look at a broad diversification of sectors. Ultimately, this is to protect ourselves, right? A lot of times, the hot and sexy thing may not turn out so well, right? So we always want to make sure when it comes to growing wealth, protection always number one.
Yeah. That's a good point, right? Protection is number one, right? Capital protection, right? Because it's your hard-earned money, you worked hard for it, you saved it. The last thing you want is investing it in a particular sector and it crashes, like what Sean mentioned, 20%, and then you panic and then you panic sell and then look, 20% out of the money, right? Sean, I want to ask you this question. Is diversification more about owning many investments or owning the right mix of investments?
So when it comes to diversification, there are many ways to achieve that, and it does not mean that having a wide number of investment instruments allows you to achieve diversification, because if you invest in many instruments, they all could be focused on a particular sector, they all could be focused on a particular geography, hence having many instruments does not achieve that. On the other hand, there are investment instruments there are ETFs, there are index funds out there are unit trusts out there. Even with one single financial instrument, it allows you to achieve the diversification that you want. So it's important for, I think, our listeners and viewers at home that you look into your particular investment instrument, find out what is being invested into, the investment objective of that particular investment instrument, and whether it achieves your investment outcome.
So just a gentle reminder for our audience tuning in as well, you can submit questions to any of our panel speakers, so just use the Q&A tab below. If you have a particular question for a particular panel member, so do let us know as well. You can indicate your question to whoever that you want to address your question to as well. Right? So back to Thomas here in this case. How can a young investor tuning in today, how can they diversify their portfolio in a very simple manner?
Yeah, I think the easiest way is to just use index funds because one thing, it's low cost, cover multiple stocks or instruments, whichever index fund you actually select. So I would say index funds would be one of the easiest way to just gain a broad diversification.
So index funds. So what do you think, Sean? Is it index funds for you as well?
Yes, so index funds is one way to do that. I think the other would be like an ETF, but I think some investors may invest into an ETF not knowing what the investment objective of the particular ETF, because they probably heard that, oh, ETF is something where I can achieve diversification, it's low cost, but not knowing that there are many ETFs out there that are very focused on a particular sector and focused on a particular even country as well, and there are ETFs that are even called synthetic ETFs that behaves in a more of a synthetic manner, that you're not really holding the underlying investments.
So understand a bit, explain a bit more about synthetic, right? Because this is a 101,
sure,
so we need to let them understand a bit more.
Yeah, so there are various types of ETFs out there. I think it's important to know that you want to invest in an ETF which allows you to get exposure to the underlying stocks. There are other types of ETF that functions more of like investment instrument of an investment instrument, and does not achieve does not allow you to invest and gain exposure to the underlying.
So basically, synthetic ETFs are if you buy the ETF, it doesn't own the underlying stock.
Yeah, or moves in a different way as compared to the stock movements of the underlying ETF.
So Dorcas, right? Some people treat CPF as the very safe portion of their portfolio, and then the rest of the money they can invest in maybe index funds like what the panelists have mentioned. How would CPF view this, right? Would CPF be the safe part of the portfolio versus the rest of the cash component where we can buy ETFs or index funds, for example?
I think this will also bring back to the question on what is the risk profile of the members again, right? So if you are generally risk averse, I mean, it will be good to just leave your monies within the CPF system. And by leaving the monies in the CPF system, it's also kind of acting like like a fixed deposit, right? So this part will be considered the safer part of the portfolio. But let's say for members who still wish to take some risk with their CPF monies, so that is where the CPF investment scheme will come in. And of course, for CPF investment schemes, we also have index funds, we have ETFs, and members will need to do their research, to mix and match, piece all the portfolio together, so that there will be sufficient diversification. Yeah, across maybe different asset classes. Yeah.
I can imagine some people already saying, "Oh, this CPF investment scheme, CPF approved investment should be good, should be safe." What's your take on that?
Okay, we generally will screen through the products. I mean, it gone through a very stringent due diligence process. Yeah, but at the end of the day, we can't control market movements. The investment returns is something that we cannot control. I mean, in the fact sheet, we also mentioned that we couldn't really depend on like historical returns. Members still need to go in to the investment with their eyes open, do their research, and also importantly, like one of the panelists mentioned, it's also about low cost. Yeah, so do look at the cost of the product before you invest, because the cost also affects the amount of return that you will get. Yeah.
Great. So, next question before we go into the Q&A, of course, once again, if you have questions, do submit it via the Q&A tab as well. So final question for, Sean and Thomas, right? How do you, or what advice would you have for our friends if they are, investing for the first time, right? Markets are, booming to an all-time high, right? Of course, corrections will come, market cycles. So what's your advice for them on how they can ride out the volatility, or how they can, when the markets are tanking, what should they be doing?
Yeah, so I think number one is we have to be comfortable that volatility is the price of admission when it comes to, and anything outside CPF, SSB, and your T-bills, volatility is going to be the admission price for you to enjoy all these returns. So when it comes to this, we want to make sure that we adopt a very, very long-term horizon, and there's a lot of studies out there that actually shows that the longer your time horizon, the lower the risk when it comes to investing in a diversified portfolio. In fact, like if I were to look back at the past 150 years, there was this study that showed that out of 1,500 scenarios, if you hold for at least 20 years, only one scenario you will lose money on an inflation-adjusted basis, right? So if you have a very long horizon and you're sufficiently diversified, generally you'll be okay. But what will happen to the stock market in the short run, nobody will know, right? It can drop 10% tomorrow, it can drop 20, 30, but you need to be okay with that. And that is when, the defensive measures we discussed today comes into play, right? We want to make sure the downside is protected. Your insurance, your credit card bills, and everything, all those are sorted out, taken care of, emergency fund. We don't touch money we need for the next 5 years. And then subsequently, this money that we put in, best if we automate it and don't look at it. Because for a lot of new investors or people who are very, we are all very busy, right? And when it comes to investing and, the eye on the price is on the long run, automating it, your salary just go in and automate the investment process out of mind. You are not emotionally affected as much, right? Because a lot of times, the biggest mistake I see most investors make is that they become too emotional on both ends of the spectrum. When the market is very bullish, they started to chase, right? Or fear FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. And when it starts going down, they wonder what could go right. Everything is going wrong, right? And they feel like running, right? They either sell at a loss or they stop investing, right? Then that's very disruptive to your compounding process.
Great. Sean, what's
Yes, Thomas brought up a great point, right, about the length of time that an investor should take, especially when investing in full equities. It's about 20 years. So then what happens, if you find that your time horizon is somewhere shorter, it could be 10 years or 15 years. You may want to have a mix of equities and bonds, and equities or stocks. Then they have an inverse relationship. So you have, a balanced portfolio of say 60-40. That would be pretty suitable for somebody who has 10 years of time horizon. But at the same time, for an investor, think about how you feel like, if you see your portfolio dropping down by 30%, you will not know for sure, like what Thomas shared, unless you go through it yourself. But you don't have to wait for it to happen. If you can imagine your portfolio value going down by 30%, think about how you feel, think about whether you have sufficient financial buffers for you to go through that. For some investors, they do set some money aside when when their portfolio value drop. They do invest a little bit more because they have the confidence that when they invest in a very diversified way, the markets do go up over time, because then you're participating in the capital markets. You believe in economic growth. You're believing in the wealth of nations. That's where we see that stock markets, if you invest in a very globally diversified way, it does go up over time. So these are things that I think as a young investor you can do for yourself. Have the patience, build up those buffers that we have spoken about. Rehearse in your mind how do you feel when the stock market drops, and then have the patience of just staying invested and riding out for the long term.
And I love this quote, right? Volatility is the price of admission. So that's something really for our young investors here to think about, right? So you must ride out the volatility. If you can, advice from our panelists, set and forget. Don't think too much about it. If that's for your retirement, leave it there, and then, don't worry so much, right? Because in the long run, the markets go up. In this case, that's what our panelists are saying, right? So I'm going to ask our panelists for one final takeaway before we end off this panel. So maybe we start with you. What is one tip to give to our friends here?
Okay, so going back to the title of the webinar, encourage you to start early, start young, and as you said, no amount is too small. Yep.
Great, thank you. And you started at 29, right? So yeah, maybe start early, right? Those of you, if you're 18 tuning in, oh my God, age is, you got the benefit of time. That's fantastic, isn't it, Sean?
Let's say you should never lose sleep when it comes to investing. Be patient, learn about investing, learn about what works for you. When you're starting out and you don't have much to invest, in fact, investing a lot of your time on growing your career, growing your skills, your knowledge, and that will give you a greater upside because your income increment will probably be higher than the amount of returns that you can get from your investment. So while you are eager to get on investing, take time to learn about it. But at the same time, don't forget about investing in yourself. Grow your knowledge, grow your career, grow your income, and after growing your income, then you have more to invest. And perhaps that's the appropriate time, where you build up your financial buffers and your safety nets. That could be a more appropriate time for you to get started investing.
Great advice there, right? But you said don't lose sleep over investment, right? So I just want to ask a follow-up question on that. If I lose sleep over investment, does that mean it's too much risk?
Yeah, there could probably be too much risk. There could probably be investing perhaps too much of what you are ready to invest. There could also probably be, you yourself not setting enough, financial buffers for your near-term savings goal, your emergency funds.
Great, thank you. One final tip.
Yeah, so I would just say don't let perfect be the enemy of good, right? What we want to do is we want to start early, start young. Don't be too worried about making mistakes if you are, starting small, right? So we just want to get our feet wet and start the compounding process.
Great, thank you very much to our three wonderful panelists. Once again, we have Thomas, Sean, and Dorcas. Final call to action from us. Do follow us on our socials as well. We're going to bring it up for you on the screen. So you can connect with CPF Board. You can see all our social links there as well. In fact, we do have a WhatsApp chat as well. All right, we're on TikTok, we're on YouTube. Of course, you can download the CPF mobile app as well to track your CPF savings. So that's CPF Board. And also, next one, on MoneySense as well. So do connect with MoneySense also. Now remember, we're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And this is brought to all of you once again by CPF and also MoneySense as well. Great, so thank you very much to all of you for joining us. Start early, that's important, all right? Investing 101 for young adults. We hope you have some takeaways from today, and most importantly is to start taking action no matter what age you are. All right, so thank you very much to all of you for joining us. We're going to wish all of you a good night, so we hope to see you next time, everybody. Take care, bye-bye.